Hello and welcome to Nigeria, the Road to 2019, a series of programs where Arise News places the audience and the choice at the heart of our coverage of the upcoming presidential elections. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, all the news, comment and analysis that provide unrivaled insight into Nigeria 2019, including President Buhari intersects the law, politics and human rights at the Nigerian Bar Association conference, insisting that the rule of law and civil rights cannot be superior to national security and the collective interest. It's drawn swift and sharp criticism from Nigeria's best legal minds as well as the opposition, who say the remarks suggest that Mr. Buhari is giving advance notice that he intends to abuse the power of his office. We hear from one of Nigeria's foremost legal minds and human rights activists. President Buhari has made news this month, arguably for all the wrong reasons. The alleged attempts by an overbearing executive to dominate the legislature, the Department of State Security siege on Parliament, yet another trip abroad that's raised concerns anew that he is in ailing health. But now, most outrageous of all, according to critics, the president's statement delivered at the opening ceremony of the Nigerian Bar Association conference that the rule of law must be subject to the supremacy of Nigeria's security and national interests and not the other way around. In other words, that the executive can brazenly ignore and circumvent the rule of law, including individual rights and presumably judicial decisions, if it felt it was acting in the national interest. Take a listen.
I believe that lawyers can contribute to another core objective of enhancing our business environment and promoting social justice by promoting respect for the rule of law, contributing to the law reform process and putting national interest and professional ethics above self in the conduct of their business. Rule of law must be subject to the supremacy of the nation's security and the national interest. Our apex court has had calls to adopt a position on this issue in this regard, and it is now a matter of judicial recognition that where national security and public interests are threatened, or there is a likelihood of their being threatened, the individual rights of those allegedly responsible must take second place in favor of the greater good of society.
President Buhari. Well, not surprisingly, that Orwellian, cringe-worthy statement has been smashed to pieces with a pickaxe by many in the legal profession who, along with the opposition, fear Mr. Buhari is giving advance notice that he intends to abuse the power of his office. President Buhari's supporters, though, insist that such measures, as the president suggested, are consistent with constitutional values. All this, of course, highlights a difficult question every modern state faces in an age of high-tech communications and international terrorism. How does a country balance collective security with individual liberty? And perhaps more relevantly, as Nigeria approaches the 2019 election, is the president's statement likely to tip the race in his favor or against him? Well, one man in whom those comments by President Buhari has stirred outrage and condemnation is the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association and founder of one of Nigeria's foremost human rights groups, the Civil Liberties Organization, or CLO, Olisa Agbakoba, who is also, of course, a senior advocate of Nigeria. And Olisa joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time. I know you're an exceedingly busy man, so we're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
Let's start first of all with your reaction to that speech, a clip of which we heard there by the president at the NBA, where you were in attendance, and his suggestion that national security and the national interest must supersede the rule of law and civil rights.
I think he's been wrongly advised by his Attorney General, because I know he referred to a judicial decision of the Supreme Court, but it's completely out of context. The national security concerns and national interests are subservient to the Constitution. Where he missed it, and he almost got it right, is the Constitution contains a number of civil liberties. And there are two kinds of civil liberties. There are those given absolutely to you. No one can detract from it. Then there are those given conditionally. So if he's referring to those given conditionally, I will understand him. But where he got it wrong, and I think his advisors should have advised him properly, is that when you want to detract from my rights, the National Assembly must prescribe it as a law, not as a statement made by him. So it's completely wrong. It's the most flawed statement I've ever heard.
But do you agree, though, with the president when he says that when fundamental human rights come into conflict or clash with national security, national security takes priority or predominates?
I don't. So, for instance, Colonel Dasuki, who has been detained on national security grounds for the last 3 years, that flouts the constitutional requirements that he should have entitlement to personal liberty. And in the face of 6 decisions of the Federal High Court, he's still in prison. So clearly he does not. Because if this flies, that's the end of democracy. That's the end of democracy.
I think a lot of people would certainly agree with what you're saying there. But the president referred to a Supreme Court decision.
Which one?
Which he said upheld national security over the rule of law. Is that your recollection of that Supreme Court
decision?
Absolutely
not. What the Supreme Court has said in a number of cases, including your dad when he was on the bench, is that in the face of a violation of civil liberties and the state cites a concern, then those civil liberties can be suspended, but not national security. And he has not even placed it in the context in which the Constitution prescribes it. The National Assembly must set out the law, not the president. It is such a draconian power for the president to be able to suspend the Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, it's a constitutional coup d'etat.
So why do you think, given what you said, that the president chose to make such a controversial statement, and worst of all, at a Nigerian Bar Association conference where the very defenders of the law were gathered, and in whose considerably large brains such a statement may be seared for life?
Laying an important foundation. What he said is that I can postpone the elections. I can declare a state of emergency in any state. If the Benue governor wants to defect, I just tell him, look, if you do so, I take over your state. It's a very crucial statement. Nigerians should go and decode it very well. It's a very dangerous statement. And I do hope that the Nigerian Bar Association will take the first opportunity to challenge it.
But do you think it is something that is without precedence, though? And to that extent, does that give a certain legitimacy to it? Because, I mean, in 2015, the elections were postponed on national security grounds.
Yes, but the elections did not violate any, there was no national, there were no issues of civil liberties, number one. There were no issues of fundamental rights, number two. So that's different. But what he's saying here is that the rule of law is subservient. Postponing an election is an entirely different matter. There was no civil liberties in conflict. So that's the danger.
Some members of the political opposition, in their reaction, have suggested that the president is giving advance notice that he intends to abuse the power of his office. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, what he's done, which is different from what the former presidents have done, is that he has validated constitutional anarchy. And that's dangerous. He has said, I will do it. And whenever the president says, I will do something, watch out, he's going to do it. So I don't know what will happen, whether there will be state of emergencies in certain states, or whether the elections will be tinkered with. I'm not sure. It's a very, 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 dangerous thing for him to have said in the presence, as you say, of a distinguished. And I'm surprised in a certain way that the NBA was not as strong in reacting to it. I'm surprised.
In fairness to them, there were quite a number of them, including yourself.
But I'm not the NBA.
Well, yeah, but you're, of course, a former...
Yes.
You mean an official statement?
Official
from the MP?
statement.
Right.
Official.
Well, maybe that may still be forthcoming, but you're right. Up to now, I haven't seen any
Yeah,
statement,
yeah.
although
Yeah.
the new president-elect,
Yes.
Mr. Usoro,
Yes, said something.
did condemn
Yes,
that address by the president,
yes.
just as you, perhaps not as strongly as you have.
Right.
But of course, you hinted there that the 2019 elections, of course, fast approaching.
Yes.
How much of a campaign or an election issue should this controversy over, civil liberties and the rule of law versus national security and the national interest be?
It ought to be number one issue. It's a big issue, unfortunately. Issues in Nigerian politics is far from clear because our politics is driven by money, the money bags. So I hope it's something that can play out in the consciousness of Nigerians. It needs to be brought to the fore that what this guy is doing, Mr. President, is exceedingly dangerous. So for me, it's the number one public issue in the election process.
In light of the statement the president made about the rule of law, what is your general take on the direction this government is leading Nigeria towards as the election approaches, with all the controversy around the Department of State Security, the National Assembly, attempts to remove the President of the Senate? Does it seem to fit a pattern of deepening overbearance from the executive and the ruling APC party, as the opposition have charged?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You summarized it very brilliantly. What's been playing out is, one, I'm sure we'll see further actions and statements that will show where the APC. I think part of what it is, it's also tied into the defection process. So there's a certain fear that the APC is, confronting, and they're saying to themselves, "We've got to do everything. Look, this is a multi-billion naira project. APC is not about to lose power. They want to hang in there, and no one's going to stop them, including the issues of democratic Nigeria. No one's going to stop them." It's so clear that the desperation is unbelievable. And we need to be very careful. I would hope that the opposition can see what's coming. There is McCarthy, there is Kwakwanso, there is Atiku, there is Kwankwanso, there are all sorts.
And of course now there's Bukola Saraki, who is the president of the Senate.
Pick one guy. The only way to beat these guys is to pick one guy. And we can all come around them and say, this is the guy. But if we have 10, 12 presidential aspirants from the opposition parties, Buhari is going to win the election.
So who would you have your money on then, at the moment? Who do you think best personifies
Atiku.
These ideals that you'd like to see happen?
Atiku, because he has structures. He's got the structures, he's got the
heft.
The heft. He's got the heavy lifting. He's got that. All of that goes for him. I'm sorry to say that, because people then say, well, he's 72. Why don't we have new people? Well, to beat these people, you need heavy lifting.
But is it all about just beating someone?
Well,
because that's exactly what happened in 2015.
Well,
we need to beat the PDP because they're so entrenched.
Because our democracy is illiberal. So when democracy is illiberal, you've got to beat the guy who's there. You don't talk about that.
That's the first step.
That's the first. When Jonathan was in there, people say, we're going to beat him. We want somebody who can beat him. They say, Buhari, did we know? We brought him in. So now we want someone who can beat Buhari. So it will keep recycling.
So the sole object
of
is to get rid of the person who's in power. And then as an afterthought,
you start
decide what you're going to do with the power that you've got.
You start constructing the government. Right now, what the money on the town is, defeat Mr. Buhari.
Yeah, but isn't it time that people like
It's
yourself?
not time.
But what I'm saying is, isn't it time that people like yourself, who are very well respected for their independent thinking and the fact that you're one of the foremost key people in the pro-democracy movement?
What do you want me to do?
Isn't it time?
No, tell me what you want me to do.
No. What I'm saying is that isn't it time that people like yourself said, no, we're not just going to remove someone from office. We're going to have a plan to take this country forward.
We don't have the strength. That's the truth. Truth be told, you need to have between 20 and 30 million naira to run this thing.
You mean billion?
Billion.
Right.
Did I say million?
Yeah.
Billion. Who's going to listen to grammar? Nobody. Nobody.
Well, on that note,
Nobody.
can I ask you to stay with
Yeah,
us?
no
We're going to
problem.
take a short break. You're watching Nigeria, the road to 2019. Plenty more still ahead, including we continue our chat with the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association and founder of the Civil Liberties Organization, Olisa Agbakoba. Is he a sort of hero of enlightened thinking and rationalism, both of which seem to be glaringly absent in Nigerian politics today? Stay with us.